You're listening to Russ Kane on
Men's radio station where men really talk.
I love that. It's a secret theatre. It can't be a secret theatre if you've just done an advert for it. German Street. It is my favourite theatre. I love German Street Theatre. And I'm going to get a quick plug in. I don't care. I mean, well, it's commercial radio. What the hell? And I'll be back at the German Street Theatre, please God willing, on Sunday, the 24th of February. Tickets are not available yet. Don't start phoning them because Penny and all the gang at the German Street Theatre are not ready for that. But they will be. I'm just giving you a bit of a heads up. Sunday, 24th of February. It's my one-man show. Caned Laughter. Right. Expert time. I am so pleased. I met this guy some months ago now when we were just thinking about putting together a men's radio station, and I was so knocked out. And I said to him, we were having coffee, and I said, if there's any chance that you could ever be a guest, and he said, I'd love to be. And I'm thrilled. Our very, very first guest on men's radio station, Noel Mecdermontt.
Wow.
Welcome.
Thanks very much. Yes, that's right.
We needed
cast of millions.
We needed
here.
one of those,
And I'm just trying to put some headphones
put
on.
some cans on.
Technically, you call them cans, don't you?
Well, I could call them the things you stick on your head.
Things you stick on your head.
Things you stick on your head, and that would do.
I can hear myself now.
Really,
that's great.
I thought we could do a bit of the sort of Steve Wright, Chris Evans type thing there. When every time anyone walks in, there's nobody in the studio, and then suddenly you put in a track, and everyone goes, ah, and it sounds, oh, that sounds busy.
Yeah.
Noel, thank you so
Great
much.
to be here.
It's look at you in your suit.
Yeah. I'm going out.
Oh, I see.
I didn't do it for you.
For a stupid minute there. What a dick. I thought
Get
for
out
a
of it.
second. I thought.
No chance. I've met you
that's
before. There's no way I'd dress
there's
up.
absolutely no way. I'm sitting here looking like I've just come to clean the car.
Yeah,
I'll do the window.
if that, yeah.
No.
I think you just cleaned it, not
No.
just about to.
No, you're crossing the line. Now.
Okay,
Shut
all
up.
right.
Just,
There you go.
Just shut up. All right, just shut up. Now. Noel Mecdermontt. If you want to go onto his website, first of all, because I'm going to do the intro and then we're going to chit-chat.
Right.
Noel Mecdermontt, psychotherapy and consultancy. Because I've always said, and it was always the tenet that Howard Jameson and I had, we are not the experts. There's no way I'm going to be giving advice because I don't know what the hell I'm talking about outside of my own sphere of life. So it says on your website, you're pioneering entrepreneurial health and social care professional. Right. Tell us a bit about your background because that's where we're at.
Okay, well, I qualified over 25 years ago. I've been in the field over 35 years. I'm not sure I really want to admit that, but there you go.
Look good on it.
Still going,
Lovely.
somehow. And I set up a company that produces support packages for people in their own homes to prevent them ending up in psychiatric hospital or in a rehab for addiction issues so they can get treatment in the community and in their own homes, which is the pioneering bit I do. It's all based upon sort of evidence of what works. We over-institutionalise people, I think, unfortunately, in
What do you mean by that?
Just using hospitals unnecessarily. We have perfectly good services that work. We have a good range of services that work to prevent hospital admission or rehab admission if we only work those systems. And in the private sector, it's not as well coordinated, to be honest. So that's what my company does, is bring what I learned from my 15, 20 years in the NHS and all that sort of stuff into the private sector, all the best practice with sort of evidence-based work, and make sure that we prevent people ending up in crisis and needing stabilisation within an institutional setting. And so we provide treatment, bespoke packages of treatment for people in their own homes, in their own communities. We wrap it around individuals and families so that it fits in with their life. And allows them to continue doing their life while also getting treatment and getting well from whatever the condition is that they have.
And obviously you've had very good results. Well, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
I mean, I don't claim to sort of have invented this stuff. I mean, we've done it in the UK for many years. When I first started 25 years ago, when I qualified and first started on the clinical side of my work, I worked a lot in hospital closure programs because it was care in the community.
Right. Oh, yes, of course.
So 84 was Care in the Community Act, and then I'm not that old, so I didn't start in 84. I was still in school at that point.
I would be stunned, but anyway.
I was still in school at that point.
Well, you've got a portrait in the attic.
That's
which is
right,
aging.
absolutely. I'm a good example of what I say. But when I started work professionally up in Scotland, we were working on hospital closure programs and moving people back into their communities of origin and supporting them in learning all the skills that they needed to have a happy life. And I have to say that for 95% of people, that worked superbly. There were a small percentage of people with very complex issues that needed higher levels of support. So we made mistakes at the beginning, not understanding that. But now I think we now understand those processes very well.
Do you think people get institutionalised? Is that one of the...
I don't think. I know they do.
No,
There's
fair enough,
evidence that they do.
I was giving it a more open-ended question.
No, it's unequivocal that institutionalisation is a bad thing and that people do get institutionalised, without a doubt. And it makes it more difficult to live your life. In some ways, I think the evidence does support this, that institutional processes are often more difficult to deal with than the original reason why the person was in for treatment. And the process of institutionalization disables people probably more than the actual illness, which is why we started shutting all these places down.
And because you get so, I'm looking at it with my amateur viewpoint, so you get so used to the regime that when it ends you can't relate
I think the easiest way to think about it is that our personality forms as a person. Our personality forms. We call it neuroplasticity. So frontal lobes of our brain remain neuroplastic or changeable for the whole of our lives. And the primary mechanism for that change is interactions between people, so relationships. Right. So if you put somebody in institutional relationships, they become the institution.
Oh.
As a personality framework. It's that simple, really. And if you put somebody in the community, they become the community. So it's the relational network around you that's shaping your frontal lobes all the time, which is where your personality lies. And so that's, I think, the most straightforward way of understanding it.
Do you think your personality gets formed, or, it can... I'm not talking about the mental side of it more, but, just generally, your personality pretty well formed, I thought, by teenage years.
No, it keeps growing. There are strong elements of our personality, particularly if it's happened earlier in our life, and it may be we're less conscious of it, and particularly if it's pre-verbal experiences, so 0 to 2. Those types of experiences have pretty profound impacts upon our personalities. And you would need to do a lot of work. If you're having damaging things happening during that time, you would need to do a lot of work as an adult to get over it. But after that, once we've got language, once we're beginning to communicate, we can then thoughtfully think about, I know a 2-year-old can't think that much, but language has emerged. By 5, the personality is formed quite strongly. But it does continue to grow. That's the great hope, and that's the great message I want to give to people, that there is nothing that is going on that we can't, with effort, change through targeted interventions. Now, there are certain types of mental illness, which I don't know if we'll talk much about, but, there are certain inherited illnesses such as schizophrenia or bipolar or something like that, which are very difficult to get rid of. But even there, working with people in a facilitating environment, in a positive environment, again, the personality still does change and grow, and the person over time will become more stable as long as they're getting specialist input around medication, etc. The person will become more stable, less likely to relapse in their illness, better socially, more integrated, have a more meaningful life, be happier, be more well-adjusted, etc., rather than if you stick them on a ward with a bunch of other people.
Now, don't miss out on the opportunity to be able to speak to Noel Mecdermontt direct. Let me remind you of the number. He says, looking at his notes, 0203 290 4411. I'll give it to you again. Bless you, James. 0203 290... Don't get that on Radio 4, do you? 0203 290 4411. Noel Mecdermontt, my very special, very first guest. Hey. Yeah, it's fantastic. I'm really tickled. What James and I were talking about earlier which is just a huge subject, and I know, Noel, we're going to come back to it
Sure.
time and time again, is depression.
Ah.
And I sort of preambled that by saying that, you know, the statistics are a shocker, that 80% of suicides are male, 20% female. There's a huge disparity there. So I guess my first question to you is, why?
Men are really good at suicide. I don't mean that flippantly. Are very successful, and when they plan their suicide, really intend it to happen. And it tends to be that women are more likely to use it as a cry for help, whereas guys have tended to have gone beyond that. There's a whole host of reasons why. I think it's better with the generations of young men now. Certainly from my time as a guy, I was taught not really to ask for help.
You see, this is exactly what James was saying earlier before
I
he
think
joined us.
Younger men are getting a better message now. I think we've learned some lessons, and we're giving. So I don't want to give a very negative message about guys are not learning the lesson, but we are. The suicide figures are still the same, and mostly I would say it's because guys are not asking for help or believing that the help is available that will help them.
So I'm not being flippant either, but they always say, well, women are much, and again, I'm not being light about this, but women are much better planners because they multitask. And the thing they always say about guys is you can't multitask, you can only do one thing. And you'd think the opposite might be true, that women are better planners. And if they, God forbid, going to plan suicide, a word you can't say on the BBC, by the way.
Oh, right, okay.
Did you
I didn't know that.
Yeah, because suicide's a crime.
Not anymore.
Well, in the BBC handbook, I digress for 10 seconds. The handbook is the size of, War and Peace, of what you can and can't do. You have to say, killed themselves. You can't say Fred Smith committed suicide.
We changed the terminology. We don't say commit anymore because it's not a crime. So you can't commit. Before you could commit suicide because it was a crime.
Why it was committed.
But it's just changed. So we, as best practice, we are suggesting that people don't say commit suicide. I don't know why the BBC would go further to say that.
So what is the correct terminology then?
Well, suicide or taking your own life. It's taking the word commit out of it because it's no longer a criminal offence to take your own life.
It's just bizarre that it ever was, of course.
Well, it's bizarre. A lot of the old laws are bizarre.
Well, yeah, they're very...
But it's also a sign of change, and that's the point I want to make, is that things are changing. So why do guys... essentially, the point is this, that guys are... particularly those that fall into depression, because it is in the nature of depression that you disconnect from people.
Yes.
You become isolated, and your motivation drops to connect, to go and do things that you used to do in the past. It's one of the diagnostic tools that we have. We look at motivation. So if people have stopped doing things that they used to enjoy doing in the past, then we go, oh, you might be depressed, because there's no reason why you wouldn't enjoy it, but the outlook on life is diminished. So that tendency to isolate, to disconnect because of the illness itself is compounded, I think, by cultural messages about dealing with things, not asking for help, being seen to be strong, and not identify. I think there's something about guys that they don't identify they might be ill. It doesn't occur to them this might be an illness. And partly that's because we don't talk about it enough, so that we don't know the signs and symptoms of illness enough. Whereas I think women often do talk about these issues. It's more current in their social circles. And if one of them is talking about things, if you're talking to a friend about something, it's more likely the friend will go, I think you sound like you're ill. Guys are unlikely to say that because they're just not educated about this stuff.
Why is it a thing, though, that I was saying earlier in the programme, that one of the main reasons for setting up men's radio station was because guys don't communicate with each other, whereas women will often, I'm not being generalised, I'm trying not to generalise, but you know where I'm going with this, Noel, that they'll go and have a coffee and kind of a bit more pour their heart out and get support that way, whereas guys seem to bottle stuff up, and that seems to lead to this huge disparity.
There's something culturally, and again, I think it's learned behaviour as opposed to genetics, but there's something culturally about where women go along to have the association with somebody else, whereas the guy goes along to do the activity. So it's the activity itself, and then possibly as a consequence, what happens is the association with somebody. And we know in the research that's been done about trying to get guys through the door of services is that you provide activities that are of interest, then you get them in, and then you encourage the conversation and the socialisation. But women will often go for the socialisation and the conversation. And it's simply, it's more about gender, the way we're brought up as genders, as opposed to anything genetic. And that's just the message. And that's why, and a lot of services that are geared. So, for example, if you think about things like parent and toddler groups, actually they're not. They're mother and toddler groups. If a guy turns up, he feels very, very excluded often, and he will be viewed in certain ways, becomes uncomfortable, and men don't tend to turn up. And because they're not structured
even in 2019, you think?
Yeah, if you look at the National Childbirth Trust website, Services for Men is in their minorities and equality section.
I had no idea.
Yeah, I was checking it because when I first started in Scotland, I literally did this work. I was working with a family service who were just worried that they didn't have enough guys coming in, fathers. Right. So I was the father's worker, and so I went out there and found out and did all this research about staff, and we produced documents, and we rejigged services so that men started coming in much more. And then 25 years ago or 20 years ago, I finished doing that work. I came back to London, and then somebody asked me about it. It was actually a patient who was struggling because they were about to become a father themselves, and they wanted some resources on fatherhood. And I said, okay, well, I got some books that I know about. You know, Steve Biddulph does some great stuff, and there's another book that he needed, which was called Sober Dad, which is a great book if people are in recovery from addictions and about to become a father, which can be very frightening for guys in recovery. And then I did some research on sort of groups for him, assuming that it would be fine now. 20 years later, of course, you'd imagine that this. And no, I went to the National Childbirth Trust website, and there it was: services, father's services under the equalities section.
So this is a big disconnect with what we're being always pushed by the media, that everything. We don't have these divides anymore, because that's what the media keeps telling us.
No, it's not true. There's a guy. I mean, there's a great news article not long ago. A guy who. Had become a father and discovered the same thing. So he's now set up a fathers and toddlers group, and has just said that's it, you know, and he's welcoming guys in to join his fathers and toddlers group. I think it's a great initiative.
It is a good idea. It's
really good.
It's really interesting, isn't it, that the media always have there's always a subtext. That's something I always go on about. I know there's a subtext to what they're pushing, and then you've got the reality, and they don't always marry up. And I think that's really annoying.
But also the other text, I think, which again, if you don't mind me interrupting,
please do.
The fact is, this guy has started the group, and I think that's the big difference these days. Is that I think men are more able and more willing now to actually just get on with it and do it. And that's a good sign. So before I was the professional up in Scotland 25 years ago now this guy's just a dad.
Yep.
That's all. And I think that's much more important when a dad does it rather than me as a professional. And that's much more inspirational and more likely, I think, to take hold in people in a similar way to when you set up the Facebook group.
Oh, the espresso bar, yeah.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a great idea.
Oh, thank you.
You know, if I do it as a psychotherapist, it's like, not going to join that. And why would you? I wouldn't.
Well, you get good advice.
Well, I wouldn't. You know what I mean? Yeah, but fair enough. But I wouldn't. You know what I mean? If Noel Mecdermontt, psychotherapist, set up a men's group, I'd be like running a mile, and quite rightly so. And I guess as professionals, we have to really understand that it's not what we're talking about. The difference between men and women is that women are encultured into a way of seeking help. Men are not encultured. And the only way men are going to become encultured into seeking help, and help-seeking behaviour is the fundamental skill that everybody has to learn to have a good life. The only way men are going to become encultured into doing that is when men do it themselves. And it seems like a conundrum, but it isn't. It's the stuff you're doing is fantastic. It really does role model. It inspires people. gets the message out there. If I do it, like I say, immediately it's a professional gig and people want to move away. So, I mean, I think it's great what you're doing, and I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you very much. I mean, the reason I called it the Espresso Bar, which then kind of led to this, obviously, with Howard's women's radio station as well, is because I wanted that. I wanted the feeling of, and it's really interesting what you were saying about activity based, because my activity would be going to just get a cup of coffee.
Yes.
And that's my activity. I didn't want to play football or, get my head beaten in rugby. I just want to go and have a coffee and check my emails or something like that.
Yeah.
And that's why I called it the Espresso Box. I wanted it to be relaxed and the sort of place that you would go. And I wanted to engender that feeling here at Men's Radio Station, where it's a place you drop in, have a listen, have a chat. He said 0203 290 4411. Well, our experts are here. Please call in, because that's the whole point. We were looking at
depression.
We could go anywhere with this, but just for convenience sake, quite frankly,
let's talk about some illnesses.
Let's just kind of talk about depression. What signs should we look for at?
Pretty straightforward.
Is Howard doing his tic-tac like he's at Kempton Park?
Does he want me out?
No, he wants you. It doesn't matter. I want you here. No, he's doing fantastic tic-tac, 3 to 4 the favourite.
Okay.
2 to 1 on.
So it's very straightforward. Depression and anxiety are very common. The great thing about it is we know lots about it, so it's not something to be afraid of. It's not difficult to treat.
But it is scary.
It is.
When you're in it, it's so frightening.
I've had depression on and off for all my life. I sort of grew up in quite a depressing childhood, so it's not unsurprising. It isn't. I think the first time it might be quite frightening, but it's actually very manageable as a condition. And we know lots about it, and we have some great support and some great techniques available to help people get over the hump of the initial sort of crisis and get into a well-managed condition for the rest of their lives and not really be too bothered about it, and then just have low-level interventions which will work long-term, and you become very stable. Now, the signs of depression are very simple to understand.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask, because, I'm talking about whether you're looking at yourself or a family member or a friend. So what are they?
Okay, so we use a diagnostic tool called a PHQ-9, which people can Google and find, and it lists the 9 symptoms of depression.
Aha.
And people can just find that and use it as a guide themselves. It's what your GP will do. They will just download that form, and that's what mental health professionals... Have you got it?
I think I have it here.
Yeah.
I think I've made a note of it here if you want to check it.
Yeah, go on.
I'm James, by the way.
James is on the ball. Or what? Is that it?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was going through as a sort of
That's
shopping list of what you don't want.
Yeah.
Because that's the DSM, isn't it? That's like what they say.
No, DSM is America.
America.
That's me being... We use ICD, which is the International Classification of Diseases.
Yeah, and I think that's where I got those from. I think that was Google.
These are the symptoms, and the PHQ-9 is slightly more involved and has a friendlier sort of terminology around it, so I think it's easier to use for people. But as a clinician, yes, this is what you'd use. Depressed mood, so feeling low. Okay.
Now, how do you distinguish between someone who's a bit cheesed off and someone who's feeling low?
It's to diagnose depression or anxiety, you use a 2-week time frame. So it's perfectly normal to feel low about an event that happens in your life and makes you for a few days feel low. That's not an illness. That's just a normal reaction to life. It's if it goes on beyond 2 weeks, then there might be a problem. So if it's been going on for a while, then there might be a problem, and it's best to then go and get some professional help to help diagnose whether you do.
If you've had a major crisis in your life, whatever it might be, it could be a divorce, it could be losing your job, it could be a million and one things, it could be finance. Those problems don't go... looking at it as a layman, you're not going to say, well, I've just lost my job, I'm feeling a bit fed up for 2 weeks. And that feeling's not going to go away if you can't get your job back, for example, or you've got divorce. Well,
actually, it's not true. It does. It comes and goes. I think when you have a life circumstance, which is where you have a natural, healthy reaction, a depressive or anxious reaction, what you'll feel is on a day-to-day basis, it won't be a permanent stuck mood. So your moods will come and go. Yes, of course, there'll be days when you feel really anxious about it, or days when you feel really depressed about it, but you won't be feeling that as a sort of leaden weight all the way through on every day. And that's the big difference, is that, of course, our feelings about things change depending on our circumstances. But even if, say, you've lost your job, and I know this, you might feel anxious and afraid, but then your kid comes in and the mood is gone. And you have a laugh with him and you play, etc., and the mood is gone. But if you're depressed, that isn't the case. You will still feel low and unable to engage with your child in that way. So does that make sense of the difference?
No, I absolutely get that.
Yeah.
The next one that we talked about was loss of pleasure in all or most activities. Does that go, what kind of marries in with not being able to play with your child?
Well, it's more about external activities and also relationships. So it would be things like if you were keen on cycling or football or something like that, and you suddenly go, I can't be bothered. It's this motivation. You no longer think it's going to be of any benefit to you. And the problem with that is that you get what we call a vicious cycle. So because you're depressed, if you do your normal activities, you're not going to get as much pleasure from them as you used to. Certain amount of truth. But if you stop doing those activities, you will become more depressed. It's what we call behavioural activation in therapy.
Right.
That you have to do them with an intellectual knowledge that they're going to help you, even though they don't feel like they are immediately. And that's the problem with that sort of loss of interest, is that somebody might go on a cycle ride and just think, well, it wasn't that much fun. But actually, they're not aware that being on that cycle ride, being out in nature, being with other people, is helping to bring them out of the depression. So it's part of treatment of people is to give them these types of activities, which we call behavioural activation. And you say, do them because they're in your diary, or do them because I've told you to do them, because they will help to bring you eventually out of the depressed mood.
And one of the things we're going to look at, I know, again and again, it will be exercise and fitness, not get yourself beach body ready and all that tabloid nonsense. I'm talking about just generally trying to keep yourself going. I'm going to look at that in a moment after these wise words.
You're listening to Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of South Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. For the past 60 years, we've been providing the world's best Cuban cigars. When it comes to cigars, there's no other than South Cigars from Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Souters would like to wish Men's Radio Station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being. Check them out on their new radio station, launching on January the 6th. Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Today's giveaway will be 2 VIP theatre tickets to the productions playing at the wonderful Jermyn Street Theatre, located just off Piccadilly in London's West End. It's free to enter, and all the details are on our website.
Hi, my name is Sahel Mirza, author, writer and speaker. I'm here to tell you about my new book, Many Mansions, which has just been published on Amazon, which outlines my journey from the depths of despair and a crisis of meaning to one of fruitful faith and the light within. You can find details of the book on Amazon, which describes it as a hot new release, and I'd love to hear from you on my website, which is www.spiritual-solution.com.
You're listening to Russ Kane on Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Hello, I'm Lawrence Davis. I'm the proud owner of South Cigars in Mayfair and Knightsbridge. We at Souters would like to wish Men's Radio Station every support in their task for helping men's emotional and mental well-being.
Sale, sale, sale at Queen Style Furniture.
Up to 50% off all our furniture styles.
We've got new styles.
And traditional styles.
Italian styles.
And German styles.
Styles for your living room.
Or styles for your bedroom.
Dining table styles.
Or a variety of lighting styles.
Queen Style Furniture.
Uxbridge Road, Southall.
We've got style.
Let me tell you about Jermyn Street Theatre. We are the smallest theatre in the West End, only 70 seats. We are a registered charity and not grant-aided, run by a small team of volunteers and trustees. Jermyn Street Theatre is a hidden gem. It combines the comfort and convenience of the West End with the intimacy of a studio. Every seat has a perfect view of the stage, and even a whisper is audible. Every seat is a premium seat. This is a secret theatre in the heart of the West End, once found, never forgotten.
You're listening to Russ Kane on
Men's radio station, where men really talk.
This is Russ Kane. I had to check who I was there for a minute. I had an identity crisis. Russ Kane coming at you live from studios in London with Men's Radio Station. My special guest, my very first guest, and I'm so excited that he's here, even if he wasn't wearing a fantastic suit. Noel Mecdermontt, psychotherapy, consultancy, and general good egg all round. So I'm really, really tickled that you could make it today. It means a lot. Means a lot. So we're going through the PHQ9.
Yeah.
See the way that I just picked up the jargon?
Well done.
Unbelievable. That's the English one, James.
Yeah.
That's the English one, James, not your American nonsense.
No, it's European as well. Let's
European
not go there.
one. We can't say the word Europe.
Go there.
Let's not say Europe.
Just in case.
We'll start saying the B word next, and then I'll just... Right. About the signs and symptoms. Signs of depression. So we looked at the constantly depressed mood, i.e. longer than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Loss of
and
pleasure.
also, it doesn't shift by... that's really important as well. I mean, it could be that you have a situation in your life that goes on for more than 2 weeks, but the depressed mood is quite fixed, and it's very different to I'm depressed because I've lost my job and I can't find a new one, and etc. Which those feelings will come and go. And particularly the example I gave was because a loved one comes in and your child comes in, and you naturally get rid of that mood and you engage with the child. Yeah. If you find you can't do that, that's a really good sign that there's a problem. If the mood is fixed, it doesn't change, and has lasted for more than 2 weeks.
What can the person in that, and we'll go through the rest of the list in a mo, what can the person, someone who's listening now and go, I think X, Y, Z in my family or my friend, that sounds like them. What can they do?
Well,
I mean, is there anything they can do?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of really good resources for loved ones of those that have these types of conditions. There's a great book people can read called Living with the Black Dog. I can't recommend it highly enough.
It's
a fantastic
Am I
book.
Right? There's a badge.
Yeah.
There's a badge thing that you can get. Yeah. It's really interesting. Was it Churchill who called it the Black Dog?
I think it was, actually. He had bipolar disorder, so he was quite...
He did?
Yeah.
I never even knew that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was leading us in quite significant times.
There you go.
But there you go. You sign that.
Apart from that, are you busy?
But a lot of people with severe and enduring mental health problems are very successful in life, and I think we need to get that message across. Carrie Fisher had bipolar disorder. Princess Leia.
Indeed. No, I know.
You met her.
I mean, not only that, she led the revolt against the Federation.
Right.
So,
that's right. And Churchill led the revolt against that other one.
And Gates Hitler.
So there you go. So you can have there is a serious point there, which is that I think that we have very, very negative media portrayals of mental illness, and it is one of the key reasons. Not the media. I don't want to bash the media. The shame associated with mental illness is one of the key reasons that people don't get help. So if you think about the latest blockbuster from Netflix, Bird Box, have you watched it?
I haven't yet, because it's had mixed reviews, and I think, do I want to...
I think it's great.
I'll
well worth watching.
Right,
I think it's great. I love Sandra Bullock.
Well,
I
I'm
think
a big
she's
fan
brilliant.
of hers. But
Yeah, and she's really, really good in this. But the one thing that really, the stereotype that really annoys me about it is that the one group of people immune to this invasion are people who are mentally ill. And then they go around, they go around trying to open the eyes, literally, of people who are not mentally ill. And it's such a stereotype that mentally ill people are dangerous to us. It's in this massive blockbuster. It's not even a questioned or the assumption.
We do feel scared. I mean, I'm being open about it.
People who are mentally ill,
feel
people
scared.
who are mentally ill are more harmful to themselves.
But
are more of a risk to themselves than anybody else, and that's the truth.
I'm getting that, but maybe it's because I come from a long family line of cowards My family crest, 2 white feathers over a bowl of custard. Just thought of that.
But you stole it from us.
No, but you do get. I get scared. Because I don't know what to do. Because do you know what it is? For me, it's I don't know which way they're going to jump. I don't know what's going to happen next because it doesn't seem rational. So therefore,
and it's not. And it is frightening.
Feeds into my fear.
It is frightening to be around unless you are given good information about it. And that's one of the things that we need to be doing much more is giving people good information about the impact upon themselves of being around somebody who has a mental illness, whether it's a severe one or a less severe one. So depression isn't such a severe mental illness, or bipolar is a much more severe mental illness. And a lot of the work I do with families in my company, for example, a lot of the work, I would say 90% of the work that we do is training the people around the person, the identified patient, as we call it, to have better reactions and to be less afraid, to have more knowledge, to be empowered with knowledge about what's going on, to empowered with knowledge about understanding treatment processes and protocols and outcomes and all this sort of stuff. If you do that, the evidence is that that's when you get stability in the life of somebody who has long-term mental illness. And you teach people not to become ill themselves. And there's this bizarre thing. If you go back to one of the first things I said about how our frontal lobes change, our personality changes through interaction with people. And we're not aware of this, but if somebody has a long-term mental illness, it shapes our personality unless we're thoughtful about it. And we become, if you like, the negative to the positive of the mental illness, and somehow our personalities get shaped so we maintain the illness, not consciously, not on purpose, but we facilitate it rather than challenge it. And so it's that thing, saying depression, to put it simply. In depression, one of the things that happens when people are very depressed is they can become quite snappy, quite angry. You talk to them about things and they become quite antisocial, particularly if you try and challenge the person to get out of their depression. And you can end up entering into that illness with them and not having a social life, not engaging because of the antisocial behaviour, disconnecting. So you need to teach people, don't do that. That's fine. This person's ill, not you. They'll be fine.
How do you not... It's really interesting what you're saying. How do you not get sucked into this vortex of... Because it could be a very intimate relationship and you're not aware that you're going down the rabbit hole with them. And
it's psychoeducation and training. And
but how does a punter like an average person get that? Because it sounds great, but do you think, how do I do that?
It's not going to happen spontaneously, although there are some great support groups out there for families and family members of people who have addictions and or other types of mental health problems. So, if you have somebody who's in active alcoholism, for example, you can go along to an organisation called Al-Anon, which is available for family members of alcoholics or family Famanon, etc., etc.
Are you saying that? I'm digressing myself again. Are you saying that, for example, addiction, whether it's gambling addiction or drug addiction, is a mental illness?
I would say so. And its official definition now is a neurological disorder, a brain disorder, a tripartite neurological disorder. Sorry to be so tediously technical.
That's your job. You are technical. That's because you know what you're talking about.
It's a brain disorder. Addiction is an inheritable brain disorder. We think about... I think it's about 60-40 environment inheritance.
So let me ask you this, which I wasn't even thinking about. When you're watching TV, we are bombarded. I mean, every single ad break with this bingo, this gambling. It's all online gambling. Online gambling is a huge part of the output of commercial television now. Yeah. Is that a dangerous thing? I'm not going to say what my opinion is. Is you as a professional, is that a dangerous thing? And part B, have you seen an increase in people wanting to take up, for example, gambling?
So this year I didn't do it, but generally every year I do a thing called Crisis at Christmas, which is where we volunteer to support people who are homeless and open up Christmas shelters and stuff like that. And so I was working for many years, or not working, I was volunteering for many years in what's called the wet shelter, which is where people are literally on the streets and still using, etc., etc. I can tell you in that time the number of people street homeless because of gambling was grew exponentially.
Wow.
Right alongside people there with heroin addiction, with alcoholism, people, ex-service personnel. It's shocking. I get very angry about that.
No,
the
you
way
should.
we treat
You should.
ex-service personnel is an absolute crime in this country.
I was heavily involved. One time I was chief parker of the Variety, the children's charity, and through that I got very heavily involved with what was called the Army Benevolent Fund, which changed its name because research showed that they did, that the soldiers didn't know what the word benevolent meant. Can you? I'm not kidding. I'm not making that up. I wish I was. Right, but give the guy a gun. And
that's right.
It's now called the Soldiers' Charity, which is a bit more straightforward.
Yeah.
And I was very heavy. And then I got involved with the Lord Mayor's Big Curry Lunch. I was first on the committee.
Yeah.
Got the committee with that. I share your anger and I share your view.
Makes me furious.
You ask someone to put their life literally on the line, not do the sort of nonsense that I do for a living and have fun. And they go out there, they could be horrifically injured or pay the ultimate price and get killed. And they come back and they're treated like trash.
And the level of mental illness in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder is huge. And what really makes me angry is we have the solutions to these things. It's not like they have some condition that we can't treat. PTSD is perfectly treatable, absolutely perfectly treatable. It's just about the resources and the will to do it. That's all. Clearly, somebody has decided this is not what we should spend money on. And if I go down this road, I will get really angry.
We'll get angry. That's
because
fine.
it infuriates me.
Well, of course it is. But it's a national disgrace. I mean, it's not just here. I mean, the way they treated Vietnam veterans in America, and I'm sure coming back from the Middle East, they're still treated in the same crappy way. Although people now go up to them in airports and say thank you for your service, which is actually I did to some soldiers the other day, and they looked at me like I was, and then they got it. I said to the guy,
no, I've been doing that as well. I think it's one of the
service.
things we've learned from America, which is very positive.
Hang on.
We're being interrupted.
Howard is here now. Wait a moment. This looks like a phone call. If I could tell you the technology to get a phone call in this studio, you wouldn't believe it. So while James is busy, handing Howard wires and God knows what else. 0203 290 4411 0203 290 4411, and my special guest is Noel Mecdermontt. And let's see if we can get the call. It's going silky smooth so far.
Apple and their dongles, eh?
Hello.
Hello there.
Oh, hello. I can hear you perfectly. Hello.
No, fantastic. As long as the technology is working.
No, the technology is working to my utter amazement. And James is doing a little dance of victory because we thought it might as well get baked bean tins and just leave it out the studio window if we had a window. Yes, hello. So do you want to give me your name?
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, my name's Isaac.
Isaac, hi there.
Hi, Isaac. This is Noel.
Right. Hi, Noel. How are you doing?
Well,
to say you're on there. You're making some very, very, very powerful and very useful points.
Thanks, Isaac. Thanks for the... Yeah.
What would you like to talk about?
It's really good when you have experts who know what they're talking about and understand their subject.
Well, that kind of is the whole point. That's kind of the whole point of Men's Radio Station, because as I said when I was introducing everything, I'm not the expert. I merely want to be a facilitator so that guys like you, Isaac, can phone up and talk to the experts.
Well, I don't know if you've got anybody in your research team as yet, but you definitely need a researcher because you've missed one or 2 points.
Okay.
And I'm so glad actually Noel was there because when you start to talk about suicide being illegal, you were 30 years out of date.
Oh, well, that's right. It's just it's interesting because I was pulled up on it at the BBC last year about that. So it's kind of interesting.
Well, this is one of the problems. You think the BBC are authoritative, and the BBC are so far behind the mark on so many areas. It's frightening. Yeah. It really is frightening.
Well, I thought to myself, Isaac, they must know better than I, considering I was in broadcasting house.
Well, actually, forgive me. I mean, I've been dealing with the BBC and having to publicly spank their botty on areas of equality and diversity going back 30 years, and they're still no better than they were 30 years ago.
Well, there we are. Anyway, Isaac, did you have... So that's the first point, and thank you for that. What would you like to talk to Noel about?
Well, I'd like to say thanks to Noel for actually talk about something in particular which is very significant but underplayed massively by so many people, and that is brain plasticity and how it affects illness. And one of the things that gets me, and I'm still waiting for this to happen, is the research showing gender differences in brain plasticity between men and women.
Right.
Because if you talk to people in the field, they will often talk about how people are given ideas and absorb them at different rates and different speeds and in different ways, which is linked to brain plasticity. But they talk about it as gendered, but there's no actual evidence on it.
I agree.
And one reason for that is that
there's little
one
evidence.
Reason for there being no evidence. Sorry.
Gender isn't really in the brain. There's sort of 46 markers of gender are biological and are around different bits of the body. We tend to think of gender as because of genitalia, which is only one of the biological markers. But there
only
isn't
one aspect, absolutely.
There isn't much in terms of. So I guess the point that you're making, and the point I would make, is that there isn't much difference between the brain of a man and the brain of a woman biologically. But culturally, there's a big difference in terms of personality and the growth in the frontal lobes of the personality, because we are encultured in different ways. So our personalities form in different ways because of that. So there's nothing biologically determined about the fact that guys are more likely to kill themselves. That's the point. That guys can learn just as much as women can learn about how to get help, get support, and not be at risk of killing themselves in terms of suicide, which I think is a really, really important point that you've made, Isaac. So thanks for making that point.
It's interesting. It's very interesting you talk about getting help. I've been around getting help for men with mental health and even particularly suicide for 30-odd years.
Yeah.
And I am horrified still that a guy says, I need help, and they get ignored. Predominantly, they are ignored. You only have to look at
I think there's some evidence to back that up. But one of the things about what there is quite a bit of evidence that backs that up. But one of the things that we have to teach people, and particularly men, that we have to teach in terms of what we call help-seeking behaviour, is one of the core elements of help-seeking behaviour is to never give up asking. And we have to teach them. And I remember, like, for example, I was in social services for longer than I want to remember, and we were teaching children about how to protect themselves. We can't stop people being damaged and damaging children, but what we can do is teach children to go and ask for help. This help-seeking behaviour is the thing that protects them from the damaging adults in their lives. And we teach them...
But then you also have the problem of dealing with the institutions, which you touched on. And forgive me, I know this personally, having dealt with it so many times and helped so many other people through it. Institutionalisation is very real.
Yeah,
and it's not just for people who say special needs and learning disabled.
But I think
if
that's
you're
right.
Dealing with, if you're dealing with somebody whose job is dependent upon you being ill, they will tend to try and keep you ill, inadvertently.
I think, there's a lot of evidence for that as well. And a lot of people are very thoughtful about that. We call it the illness model, that you have to be ill to get a service, as opposed to being well to get a service, which is bonkers, because we want people to be well. So we have a system which is based upon you being ill. So to go to hospital, you need to be ill, as opposed to go to hospital to learn how to be well. And it's a crazy system. We need to turn it around. It is being turned around. Public Health England now have a lot of programs going on. If you think about things like anti-smoking campaigns, which have done the most for health in this country, that's a positive campaign that doesn't focus on illness. It's exactly the same in mental health and addiction, that the focus now is on recovery, not the illness, and not the expert. And that's really what we're talking about this morning.
What's your view then on male-centric organisations such as Men's Shed and even the Calm Zone?
I don't have a general view on men-centric organisations. I tend to look at them individually. Some are good and some are really weird, is the truth. But I think that's true of all organisations. I think you have to sort of do your own risk assessment of any organisation that you get involved with, and not take things at face value, particularly in social media, not to take things at face value, and look at the rules and regulations that are on there. Are there safe rules for safe conduct? Is it well managed? If somebody's abusive, does a moderator step in and stop the abuse and ban them, and all that sort of stuff? So it's pretty much straightforward stuff, I think, and that's the truth. If you're going to get involved in a men's organisation, great, go for it, but do a risk assessment.
Well, for example, if you look at Calm Zone, they're the only organisation which can show that their work has actually cut male suicide rates in the last 10 years.
You're great. And that's the sort of information that you need from people.
Sorry?
And that's the sort of information people need to be checking out on the websites and looking at the evidence of the organisations.
Sorry, I'm an inveterate checker. I check facts and information. Yeah. And I keep on checking, which I find it amazing at times, the amount of mythology being thrown around.
Yeah.
And people accepting myths as reality when there's nothing behind it at all.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the things which I've come across more than anything else in dealing with men's health is something called the Woozle effect, false evidence by citation.
Yeah.
Once something is claimed to be true and repeated a number of times, it's taken as truth even when there's no truth in it.
I think one of the, as a professional, what I do,
which are based upon mythology.
So, as a professional, what I do,
you then have to really fight to tear down the mythology before you can even get to deal with reality.
I don't think it's that. I mean, I wouldn't suggest sort of doing that mountain sort of metaphor for it. I think there's a much more straightforward way of dealing with it. So there's some really good public information available for people who want to check out around mental health, for example, around any treatment.
Yeah.
And it's by an organisation called NICE, National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence. If you Google any condition, go depression, and then put the word NICE in front of it, it will take you straight to the NICE website, which is has all the evidence base that you need, and it will literally take you through step by step how to treat any condition. It's what clinicians use all the time. It's what I use all the time. This is the clinical guidance, and it's available for the public as well, so you can check that out.
I'm glad you said it's the guidance you use, and you corrected it from what clinicians use, because not all of them do. And that it's very important to empower people with information so they can understand.
I think it's also very important for us to focus on where the conversation needs to be, which is in where people are doing the good work. I think the people who are doing the bad work get far too much attention. So here we're doing good work. Yeah. The guy who sets up the fathers and toddlers group needs to get more attention. Yep. And that's what we need to be focusing on, is the success stories that are happening out there.
Of course, good news doesn't... The problem is, as we know, Noel and Isaac, that the good news, and I'm very cynical about this, good news doesn't sell papers. That's the problem, and that's it in a nutshell. You want to hear you know, there was one of the main papers. The rule to all the writers is leave them angry or leave them worried. I'm not going to name the paper, but it's huge, and that's what they're told. And when you bear that in mind and you go through the articles, Isaac, you'll think either I'm really annoyed about this, or, oh my God, now I'm really worried about it. And of course, because everything's been written to that slant, that's like, I'm an ex-advertising guy. That was the brief. What got you into your interest and your study of this area, Isaac? I'm just being nosy, if you don't mind.
Well, I've been dealing with inequality most of my life, and as a gay man, I had to deal with massive levels of inequality through the 80s and 90s,
right?
Particularly around the issues of AIDS and HIV, and the levels of discrimination and hate I saw were unbelievable.
Yeah.
Then, due to events in my life, I actually became disabled, and the levels of discrimination I've seen around disability are scary beyond belief, even today.
It's amazing,
and through looking at and mapping out the patterns and nature and the incidence of inequality, one of the things that became clear is, as I was looking at the figures, is that there's a vast amount of inequality actually against men as opposed to women. And even in the last couple of days, there's been a major report come out, a new scientific study, re-articulating the question of inequality on a global basis. But as they point out, most measures of inequality are inequality against women. They never look at inequality against men. So they've rebalanced it, so they're looking at inequality against men and women.
Right.
And then they've actually found that in a number of countries, men are treated very, very badly compared to women. And the UK happens to be one of them.
And how did you, I'm just curious, only because it's our very first show, the first of, please God, many. How did you, Isaac, come across Men's Radio Station? How did you find out about us? Hello?
Sorry, hello?
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, yeah, my headset died.
Oh, right.
You're having technical problems in the studio. I'm having technical problems here.
Okay, you're probably sitting.
We're
in
of the generation that have technical problems.
Well, yeah. What we need is really a 10-year-old to come in, and just because they always know what they're doing. Best I could come up with James, who's at least 15. What I was asking, Isaac, was, I'm just curious, because this is a huge adventure for us, and I'm thrilled that you're our very first caller. So thank you very much, and congrats on that, and thank you for supporting us. How did you come across Men's Radio Station?
I actually saw some people discussing it online.
Wow. Okay.
And it was just announced that it was starting.
Yep.
And the immediate question was, is it going to be biased or not?
Biased in what?
And
biased
it's a very
in what
legitimate
way?
question to ask.
Oh yes, it is. But biased in what? Biased in what way?
Well, forgive me. I mean, from the work, as I said, I don't know if you caught what I was saying about my background around equality and diversity.
Oh yeah. No, got it all.
Over the years, I've observed a particular problem. And that is, you get people who go with the socially convenient image and that goes with the hard reality.
Right.
So it's interesting when you see people who go with a hard reality, how they will often get destroyed, attacked, vilified, demeaned, put down. It's shocking to see. And it's amazing to see people who've carried on going after decades of that sort of behavior. You tend to get an established pattern of thinking which agrees with certain people's desires and wants, and then it can take a long time to correct the errors that come with that.
Right.
I mean, a classic example would be domestic abuse and violence. I mean, I'm always amazed when I have to explain this to people that the first ever direct access domestic violence refuge in the world was founded in 1972 in Chiswick in London by accident, by an amazing lady called Erin Pizzey.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
People are even more amazed when I point out that by 1974 she had the world's first ever direct access refuge for men and their children in London and Chiswick as well.
Oh, she was an extraordinary
People
pioneer.
go, what happened? Nobody would support her, nobody would fund her, and had to close after 6 months. But from the outset, Erin was very clear. Her own research she was doing was identifying that there was as much violence by men against women as there was by women against men. Now, we're literally 50 years down the line, and people are starting to actually recognise that. And it's been amazing in the New Year's Honours List that the Mankind Initiative and Mark Brooks have been honoured in the New Year's Honours List. Long, long overdue. Do you know the one person who has not been acknowledged in the New Year's Honours List ever?
No.
Erin Pizzey.
Oh.
She's never been honoured. There's a political move against her because from the outset she was saying there's an issue here and it's an equality issue. That wasn't acceptable. And she's literally suffered 50 years of negation, abuse. I mean, she had to leave the country because her family was so damaged by what was happening. She emigrated and went to America.
I think there is a significant truth in that a lot of services around domestic abuse, not just the violence, because I think it's broader than violence.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of services have a gender-centric focus, which is around women, and don't understand the needs of guys, particularly guys who've been in heterosexual relationships where they may have experienced violence from their sort of partner as well. In terms of the levels of violence, and that's why I don't want to talk about domestic violence alone, because I think it is broader in terms of domestic abuse. That what tends to be the case is that the severity of the violence from man to woman or man to man is greater than the severity of the violence from woman to man. And
yet you talk about brain plasticity, and it's recognised.
That's the point I'm making about domestic abuse.
Psychological abuse and violence.
That's the point I'm making about domestic abuse. You see, and then also looking at the impact on children. So, for example, I mean, we're going to have to wind this up in a minute, but for example, one of the reasons why the Children Act was changed in 2000, there was a line has been inserted about how a child witnessing domestic abuse is being physically abused in terms of child abuse. And that was a change in the law to recognise exactly what we're talking about, which is the impact of seeing abuse and how it changes our mind. But I think we need to move on because we're going to be talking about the depression stuff.
Thank you for highlighting that even the government were forced to acknowledge the impact upon children. Yeah. But if it was a woman with children saying there's impact, she could escape. If it was a man with children, they couldn't. So half the children who've been subject to domestic abuse and violence in the UK are still being let down. And that's because their fathers, as the victim, are not being supported.
I think that's
So
going to be a
we're
theme,
talking about-
Isaac.
we're
That's going to be a
talking
theme
about
that
having
we'll
to
come back to, definitely. First of all, I want to thank you so much for coming on. You're our very first caller. I hope you're going to call back next week because you got a lot to say, and it's very interesting what you have to say. And
Well, the fact is, I've been doing my homework for a long time.
And it shows.
So I actually do
and it shows
the information that's going out.
Well, bless you for that. Isaac, thank you so much. I really appreciate you calling Men's Radio Station. So that's our first caller.
Great.
And how interesting.
Just, if you don't mind, with my professional hat on, if anybody listening to this has been affected adversely, then there are a number of help groups out there. So Samaritans are very good. I'm absolutely happy if you give my number out to people if you've had any sort of negative reactions to any of this. 07506 319 745. Please call.
You're going to have to say that so much slower.
07506 319 745, or email me info@noelmecdermontt.net. If this has brought up these domestic violence is a very triggering subject, and if you're in it or you've experienced it, I did myself. That's what I grew up in.
Oh my God!
And I was very grateful my mum left my father. A very brave move on her part, but I understand exactly what goes on in the mind of a child like that, and I would encourage you to get help if you've been triggered at all by any of this stuff. Do reach out and get help. And there are services for guys as well. I just want to make that point. There are lots of services for guys, and the key thing is this help-seeking behaviour, and the key of help-seeking behaviour is never give up asking for help. Never give up. You will get it.
My special guest, Noel Mecdermontt. We'll be right back in a moment.
You're listening to Russ Kane on
Men's Radio Station, where men really talk.
Thank you so much for joining us here at Men's Radio Station, coming at you live from the centre of London. It really is, as a matter of fact. My special guest, and our first guest ever on Men's Radio Station, because we only kicked off today, Noel Mecdermontt, who is just being, frankly, brilliant as far as I'm concerned. And I'm allowed to say that because I'm co-founder. I say what the hell I want. All right, so we're discussing, and that was a really interesting call. Sorry, I just kicked the entire desk. That was a really interesting call from Isaac. Isaac, I know you'll still be listening on your headset, sort of like Tony Hancock with the thing. 0203, do what Isaac did, call us direct. 0203 290 4411. I'll give you that again. 0203 290 4411. Noel, we're going through the PHQ-9. I just love the way I'm throwing that in, which is the European standard for checking.
World standard.
I was just doing so well for a second.
I'm such
James, stop looking so pleased with yourself that I screwed up.
I'm such a nerd about this stuff.
No,
it's embarrassing.
Nerd away. You're wearing a suit. You can do what you want. Right. So we've covered depressed mood.
Okay. Loss of pleasure in doing activities.
Now, weight change or change in appetite.
It's more like change in appetite. So the key is either overeating or undereating.
Right.
So, and it's a sudden change. You would suddenly become much more stuffing your face or much more avoidant of food. And it's a key sign. And it's to do with stress hormones in the body.
So when they say, to use that wonderful phrase, well, I'm comfort eating.
Fine,
what does that
go
mean?
ahead. As long as you're not doing it on a regular basis, you'll be okay. Using food emotionally is okay, as long as you're not using it as a substitute for real relationships with people. So I've done it. I've sat down and porked out on something for whatever reason. But
looking at you now, you look like you porked out on like 2 lettuce leaves because you're horribly slim, which is another reason
my
to
partner
dislike
wouldn't agree with you on that one,
all
I'm
right,
sure.
okay.
And neither would my boy. He sort of said his view is he's almost fat.
Wow.
He's almost fat. That's his view.
Your boy's not coming into this studio ever. Well, he's banned. James, make a note. Boy is banned.
The boy is banned.
Completely. Mcdermontt, banned.
So we have an emotional relationship to food, and we should have, and it should be a positive, healthy emotional.
See, I look
relationship.
forward to if I know I'm having dinner, whatever, with my own partner, whatever. I look forward to that.
Yeah,
that's a nice. I look forward to that, and I love cooking. So that's
it's a
okay.
Key social event.
I'm not depressed
Absolutely.
about that.
No.
That's
It's a key
right.
social event. It's really it's a very personal one. It's about you noticing that, or somebody noticing that your usual eating patterns have suddenly shifted to something else. That's the key indicator. Not that you sort of might have had a couple of nights of porking out or something, or suddenly go on a.
But what would it, I mean? For example, what you're eating? I don't know. I'm grabbing straws here. You're junk food, or you're suddenly eating lots of crisps, or
eating it every day. During the day, you're grazing all the day.
Right.
You may introduce high levels of carbs into your diet that weren't there before, so cakes and biscuits and chocolate, etc., etc. But it would be an unusual addition.
We're on thin ice here.
Okay, or the opposite as well. And it's really important to understand that the opposite can be true, that you suddenly become very avoidant of food. And that you don't want it, and you don't feel like you have an appetite.
Right.
So it's overeating or undereating.
And would you then maybe start drinking more? Is that something else to look out for, to notice in yourself?
Self-medication? You mean alcohol, drinking alcohol?
Yeah, booze.
I mean, you can drink as much water as you want. Don't worry about that. Just
Okay.
go for it. Water's not going to hurt you. Alcohol, self-medication is something that people will often do, particularly guys. Will use alcohol as a way of medicating, and especially around anxiety, as well as depression. It's a common thing that you hear from people. So again, if you see a spike in your alcohol use, you're going out more or you're drinking more, or somebody sees that, a sudden spike in it, then that's a warning sign. I mean, in terms of alcohol, the guidelines are quite clear. Most people break them in this country a lot. But to be safe with alcohol, you should have 2 or 3 nights a week where you're not drinking, at least. Okay? Regular consumption of alcohol is a bad idea.
I've just fallen at the first hurdle here.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll pick you up.
Big time.
I can sort you out. I've got the skills, mate. I've got the skills.
You
to sort
have,
you out.
which is why, of course. You, but no, all right.
Let's go to the next one.
Let me just digress very, very, very quickly.
We're not allowed to digress. We've got to get to. Go on, you're the boss. You digress if you want.
You know what?
Who can control this?
Actually, you're right. Come to think of it, but with if I like a glass, because loads of people must say, wait a minute. He just said we shouldn't have drink. If I like a glass of wine, or let's go crazy, I won't have more. 2 glasses of wine. That's it. Then is that okay?
I think regular drinking every day is not okay. That's it.
Oh, crumbs! All right,
There are no safe limits to alcohol when it comes to cancer, for example. Most people don't know that. Alcohol is incredibly carcinogenic. If you drink alcohol, you're increasing your risk of cancer. That's it. So medically, there's no safe limits, but there are limits that you can put on your alcohol consumption that reduce the other problems that come from it.
Right.
Yeah.
We have another call.
Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. Hello.
Hi, Russ. Hi there.
Hi there. How are you? Who's this?
Hi. Yeah, I'm Will.
Will.
This
hello.
is Fraser.
Hi, Will. How are you?
Hi, Will.
Oh, Will, go ahead.
Hi. Hello.
Yep. Hello. No, Will, we can hear you loud
Hi there.
and clear. Beautiful.
Okay, great. This is
okay.
Fraser. Yeah. No, I saw some of the content on your Twitter page on the Men's Mental Health Radio, and I just wanted to reach out because it's a topic that I'm actually very interested in.
Oh, great.
An area that I've actually done quite a bit of research in as well. And one of the things that I kind of struck me about actually concept of men's mental health and actually treatment in men's mental health is I actually think kind of online content, blog content can be really helpful. I run a blog called Get Psyched, and I know the blog by PsychReg are really positive in promoting mental health. I actually see a lot of men coming forward and engaging with that online content to help understand their mental health a little bit better, to help treat their mental health better. And it's very much connected to a lot of the research that I've actually done in looking at the group of men's mental health. So, it's kind of an encouragement to you guys as well, because I think this kind of radio station is a fantastic idea.
Oh, thank you, Will. I really appreciate the fact you've taken the time and trouble to phone. Actually, because we're not the BBC, it is us, and we're like putting our toe in the water, thinking, I don't know. I could sit here for 3 hours like Nobby No Mates. It's been brilliant. I mean, Noel Mecdermontt, who's our special first guest, and will hopefully, if he could stand it, come back again. This is his area of excellence. Of course, is giving all of this help. I just try and facilitate, as I've said.
There are some great blogs out there, and I think it's a really good way of people sharing information. Even if some of the information isn't that accurate, I think getting the conversation going is really, really important. One of the issues, I think, that as a professional rather than as just a guy, but one of the things that as a professional is that my profession typically have been avoidant of using these types of forums because they're afraid of confidentiality, professionalism, etc., etc., etc. I made a decision a long time ago that this type of area, blogging, online, social media, Facebook, etc., was where people are, and I needed to be there as a professional. So I have a Facebook page. I have a blog which goes out regularly from my website. People can sign up for it, where I talk on video about mental health problems and give proper grounded advice. And we have Twitter feeds. We have all of these things in which we are constantly pushing out positive information on sort of mental health issues and sort of evidence-based mental health issues. So I totally agree with you that this is what we need to be doing. It's fantastic. I also agree with you that men's radio is a brilliant idea, and it's awesome that it started. We've been wanting this for a long time. So well done, Russ.
Well, thank you, and well done, Howard, as well, for putting up with me, which is, as people will tell you, not the easiest thing in the world. Will, is there anything else? Is there anything you'd specifically like to ask Noel while we have the pleasure of his company?
Well, I suppose kind of asking a little bit about how he's found the uptake of his blog kind of content with men in particular. I mean, I'm a counselling psychologist in training, and I know that my blog Get Psyched is doing really well in the men's realm because of elements like confidentiality. Because I know that PsychReg, their blog, do the exact same thing. They get great uptake in men when looking at things like men's mental health concepts, like mental health. It's a really positive environment. It's a really, really, and it was great to hear him say that he's a professional that wants to meet the population where they are. And I think
where else would you meet them?
Do
you know what I mean? It's like, where else would you meet them? And they're not coming to my office, so I have no interest.
No.
This has been my philosophy since I started work. When I did the father's work up in Scotland, I guess you're from there, I'm guessing? From Scotland?
Yes, up in Glasgow.
I was over in Edinburgh doing it, so but I know Glasgow well.
Brilliant.
And of course it was about going out. And in mental health, we call this assertive outreach. You go out to people and you provide services where they are, which is why I think this online stuff is so exciting, because there's a lot of people who wouldn't go anywhere near a psychotherapist's office, and quite right too. But they will get online, they will join a Facebook group, they will read a blog, they will phone a friend.
Let me ask you both the question, as I've got Will on the line and Noel sitting with me in the studio here at Men's Radio Station. When people don't feel well, I'm using well generally, so bear with me for a sec. They tend to go online, and the next thing they think, my God, I've just read this on the internet, it must be true, I'm dying. But most of it is nonsense. I mean, there's a big proportion of it which is very scary, that isn't the real. I'm talking more about physical illness, which is a subject obviously we're going to cover later, more than the mental illness side. But some of that stuff is
don't use the internet to diagnose yourself.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Use a professional to diagnose you. Do not diagnose yourself through the internet. Use the internet for what it's really good at, which is developing connections and relationships with other people. That's what it's there for.
I think, I think it's. Sorry to interrupt you there. I think, first of all, I totally agree. I think as well, though, because I think one of the follies, one of the issues with online content and blog work is that you don't know really who's writing that content. You don't necessarily know where that content is coming from, and that's where I feel that we need professionals, we need psychologists, trainees, therapists, counsellors to be reviewing that online content as well. 100%. Because you think about it. I mean, I read a lot of empirical literature, a lot of empirical sources. Those sources are primarily catered for psychologists and therapists to read themselves. The general public don't access those journal articles. They access content online. So if we have psychologists in that premise, in those environments, actually engaging with men, that's what we need.
Totally agree, Will. Absolutely, more power to you.
Now,
if I can help in any way, let me know. Because
Will, let's be
totally right.
Yeah, let's be blatantly commercial. Go on, let's have a nice plug for your blog and everything. Come on.
Well, my blog is it's called Get Psyched, and I do a YouTube channel. I do weekly videos. I do regular blog content. I do a lot of social media stuff as well on Instagram. I also do a lot of work with PsychReg, and PsychReg do actually multiple blog posts a day. Yeah. They have a YouTube channel called The Mental Breakdown. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Will, do us a favour. Email me some links, and I'll send them out through my team as well. I've got a social media and marketing team. I'd be absolutely delighted to send them out through our newsletters and etc. I mean, the more we connect like this, the better, mate. Absolutely.
Completely agree.
Well, thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. Are you kidding? Thank you so much for calling us. Really appreciate it.
Not at all.
And come back again, please. Okay.
I'll
bye.
do that.
Bye now.
Thanks, bye.
So, yeah, that's really interesting. I'm loving all this. So, we're going through the list.
Let's try and get through this
Let's try and do that. Who knew people would phone? Unbelievable. If you build it, he will come. 0203 290 4411. Noel Mecdermontt, my special guest.
Depressed mood is one thing. So, loss of motivation to do previous activities is another sign. Significant changes in appetite is another sign. The next sign is change in sleep patterns. Problems getting to sleep, problems staying asleep, or sleeping too much. So it's
all of the above.
It's the same, but it's the point is a significant shift in your normal pattern. So it's a significant shift in your normal pattern of eating, or appetite, or a significant shift in your normal pattern of sleep. Whatever your normal pattern is, it doesn't really matter. But if there is a significant shift, either to being unable to sleep or conversely sleeping too much.
I'm being, as I've got the expert here with me, let me just for once ask a question about myself. I sleep very badly, but as I've always slept badly, that's kind of the norm. Is that right?
That's not a sign that you have depression or anxiety, but you can learn to sleep better. We have a thing called sleep hygiene, where we teach people how to sleep. And it works.
I'll sign up for that.
It really, absolutely.
I wanted to get an early night's sleep. I went to bed really early last night. Well, really early for me, 2:30 in the morning, I'm wide awake. 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm still awake. I mean, it drove me nuts.
Thinking about like a newborn child, does it know how to sleep? No. We teach it how to sleep.
Right.
So we learn how to sleep, and we learn how not to sleep. Either way, we just get into the habit of it. And it's just a simple educational program, change behaviours. You'll be sleeping in no time, I promise you, like a little baby. Like a little baby.
Although, I'm like, right, so now we've got that diminished concentration. Have I skipped anything? No,
fatigue and loss of energy.
Yeah, I've skipped that.
So being overly tired all the time and not being able to have any energy is also a significant sign. And it's to do with stress hormones in your body. And you lack energy, you lack motivation, you have a depressed mood, you're under or overeating, your sleep is disturbed. These are really significant problems now for people. They don't have the energy to do things.
Yes.
So it is all, you can see it's all combining into a perfect storm of isolation, lack of energy, not sleeping properly. Lack of sleep is illegal in prisons, for example. You're not allowed to deprive somebody of sleep. It's a form of torture.
Oh, yes.
So sleep deprivation, for example, is a really big problem. Diminished concentration, that tends to be things like if you find that you can't read the newspaper as you used to, or that you're watching the television and your mind wanders off, or literally you can be talking to somebody and lose the thread and just wander off in your mind and come back to it. So I mean, it's quite significant, depending on the level of it. Are we going to another?
Can we do that?
Yeah,
can we do that?
That's
we're gonna just look at this technical genius I am. Said no one ever. Hello there. Can you hear us all right?
Hello, is that Russ?
It is. Yes, Russ. Hello.
Hello, Russ. It's Linda Wright.
Hello. Hello, Linda.
Hello. How are you? It's sounding very good.
We're all good. Noel and I are great. James is good, and Howard, who knows? Anyway, yeah, we're fine. Thank you. We're fine. Thank
I'm
you.
not going to take up much of your time, but I just was listening to your previous guest, and amidst his advice, he said, you were obviously discussing alcohol, and he said You said water. What about water? And he said that's absolutely fine. You can drink as much water.
Yep, Noel Mecdermontt, and he's listening to you right now, Linda. Right?
Right. Could I have his name again? Sorry.
Noel.
Hello, Noel.
Hello.
Hello, Noel. Have you heard of something called hypnotremia?
No.
No.
Tell me about it.
Okay. If you drink too much water too quickly, your brain expands. If you hear about marathon runners who die at the end of the London Marathon, the New York Marathon, whatever, people always assume they've died of a cardiac arrest. It's usually because they've ingested too much water too quickly.
Right.
Right? So few people know about this. Now, I have got chronic kidney disease as a result of being told to drink more water. This is way back. And if you watch elite runners or any elite athletes, when they're running a marathon, they will sip, throw the cup, sip, throw the cup. So apologies, but
no apologies necessary. I'm always up for learning. So thank you very much for sharing that with me. So
this is a real topic that if you Google a Telegraph article, Anthony Andrews, My Battle with the Bottle, he went into a coma when he was performing in My Fair Lady,
Thank you.
Pygmalion,
Thank you.
Something like that, because he was drinking 5 litres of water a day.
Thanks, Linda. That's really helpful. I'll be more moderate in my encouragement of water in future. That's
Linda,
really
will you call?
you.
Thank you for your call. Linda, will you call us back in later shows?
Of course I will.
Oh, bless you. Appreciate it.
It's something I'm just, and I was just, I'm on my way on a journey, just drying my hair, heard that. Ugh, there we go again.
Well, listen, thank you.
Like.
A, thank you for listening. B, thank you for the advice. And C, thank you so much for taking the time and trouble to call. Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Linda, we'll speak to you soon here on Men's Radio Station. Thanks a lot.
So I'm big enough to learn, so I'm just going to change that advice on water.
Okay.
Don't overwater yourself.
Calls himself an expert.
Oh, there you go. I'm useless. He's going to throw me out now.
Another quid, we could have got Piers Morgan. Right. So now this next one is something that, in fact, James and I were talking about a lot before you joined us. Feeling, and this to me is horrible.
Yeah.
Feelings of guilt or worthlessness. That is something that I think so many people struggle with.
I think it's really in particular in reference to when you're feeling mentally ill and you have a family or friends around you, you begin to feel the way the worthlessness manifests is you begin to feel you're a burden. And it's that sense of I'm a burden on people. And of course you're not. You're just ill. And nobody thinks you're a burden or anything like that. But you project this worthlessness and guilt onto the people around you, which can be very, very devastating, because then you can get into a cycle of not talking about what's going on because you think you're a burden. I can't talk about this again. I'm going to burden them. And the more you do that to yourself, the more isolated you become, and the more severe your condition becomes. So it has this vicious cycle thing again.
And of course, if you're somehow being bullied, whether face to face or online or whatever, that feeling of worthlessness just must be amplified, I would have thought.
And it's also, I think, as a culture, we have a sense in which we need to be productive, to be valuable, of value. And of course, when you're ill, you're not as productive as you were. I mean, that's a fact, no matter what the illness is.
It's one of the things I really want to talk to you about. Please God, you come back, if you could take it, is this thing of who am I am I just identified through, I don't mean me personally, obviously. Who am I? Am I just...
You can have an existential crisis while we're here. You're in safe hands, I promise you.
I'm in a safe space.
I've had lots of existential crises in my office over the years.
I have them.
Go and have them.
I have them all the time. No, but are you just valued...
It'd be a lot of money, though.
I'm sorry, James, did you hear something? I had the M word there. I had the M word. Suddenly I can't hear. God, is that the time as we head up to the... Well, we don't even do the news here. The news, it's all crap. Right, that's the news. That's how we do the news on Men's Radio Station. Right, and finally...
Suicidality.
Yes.
Now, the important thing about suicidality is that a lot of people are really, really afraid of admitting that they've had suicidal thoughts. Now, suicidal ideation is what we call it. Thoughts and feelings, and it's very much linked to worthlessness. Now, in most people, suicidality, the way it manifests is, a sense of I don't want to carry on, not a positive desire to kill themselves. I can't be, but I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. Or I wish I could just go to sleep and not wake up.
Yes,
and that's just the most common.
Isn't the thing you hear the most is I've just had enough.
I've just had enough. That's it. I don't want to carry on. There's no point. I don't want this to carry on. And the thing about suicidality to understand is that really what people are saying when they don't want it to carry on, I don't want my life to feel this bad. I want the badness to end. It's not that I want my life to end. I just want the badness to end. Yeah.
And they feel that there's no other area except to end it.
Well, it can be like that, but not as severe for most people. So we have a way of sort of grading suicidal ideation. Of course, we need to know how likely somebody is to actually hurt themselves. And this sort of low-level wanting to give up, want the pain to stop is serious, but it's not a significant sign that somebody actually will hurt themselves. And I think often people hold back on telling people they have these feelings because they're afraid that their loved ones will overreact and panic, and they'll end up locked up in some psychiatric ward. It's not going to happen. I can just say that now. It's not going to happen. Suicidality...
I've got to ask you this. How do you know that? Because if you're looking at someone who is a family member and you really are worried, I don't know, I'm just using this as an example. You're really worried. How do you know when you put your head on the pillow they're not going to go and do, as everyone else says, I hope he doesn't do something stupid?
Well, the more people talk about their suicidal feelings, the less likely they are to do it, to be honest. I mean, they can still do, but the way I measure it as a professional, I use a thing called a Columbia Suicide Rating Scale, there you go, which looks at, the key point is this, that the really alarming signs in suicidality, if somebody has a plan, a specific plan of how they're going to kill themselves and an intention, that's when you phone the ambulance. That's the point at which you say, this has gone on too much. Yeah. When somebody's just feeling like they're fed up, they don't want to wake up in the morning, you don't need to ring alarm bells. All of these things, if you're seeing any of those, if you're saying, if somebody has those types of the 9 symptoms we've described for over 2 weeks, you really need to be getting professional help. And I want to talk about the professional help that you can get, because in the UK we have fantastic services for people. We have a thing called IAPT, Increased Access to Psychological Therapies, which is a national programme, absolutely free. You can self-refer. Wherever you live in the UK, if you just go type in the letters IAPT and the name of your borough, it'll take you straight to the website concerned for your area. They're usually called wellbeing services, but they're fully funded by the NHS. They're what's called primary care, so that you don't need to be referred in by anybody else. It's like going to an A&E. You don't need a doctor to tell you can go to an A&E. So you just phone them up, they'll do an online assessment, and they will give you fantastic range of evidence-based therapies to help with these conditions. Absolutely free. Or you can go and find it privately if it doesn't fit you. There's plenty of people who do it. The key things is to understand that people are doing evidence-based therapies and interventions, which are cognitive behavioural therapy, mindfulness in groups. Those are the key things, as well as medication. If somebody is going to offer you a therapy which is tell me about your childhood because you're depressed, that's not good. You don't want to be doing that.
We could talk about that. I didn't even
there is a form,
think we could talk about it this long. We could talk about this for the next
There is a form
day.
of what's called dynamic interpersonal therapy, which is offered to people longer term, which looks at that type of talking therapy, but only if somebody's been through this whole process of cognitive behavioral work, medication, and mindfulness groups. It should not be the first port of call, because there are some people with treatment-resistant depression that respond really well to psychodynamic approaches. But you must do this other stuff first. If you go into psychodynamic approach first, there's no evidence it's going to help, and there's lots of evidence it might actually harm you.
Wow.
So you stick with the evidence base first, and then you later on, with a professional assistance, you make the assessment that maybe you're going to do some depth work around. Now, the point about having depression is depression itself may be a symptom of something else, and you have to diagnose. So there's depression that people have, which is an illness. It goes on for longer than 2 weeks. It's quite severe. It interferes with life, and you have those 9 symptoms.
Right.
That's perfectly treatable. If the depression is an expression of something else, say trauma from your childhood, then you need specialist trauma work done alongside the work at managing the depression. Okay. If the depression is a symptom of you overusing alcohol, you need help with the alcohol and reducing that. Do you understand?
Or drugs or whatever. I get
whatever it is. You know,
Noel, how do people get hold of you?
You can call me 07506 319 745. Email me info@noelmcdermontt.net. You can join my Facebook page, Psychotherapy and Consultancy Limited on Facebook. You can join us on Twitter, Noel Mecdermontt. You can join us on LinkedIn, Noel Mecdermontt, etc., etc. My website, www.noelmcdermontt.net.
Noel, thank you so much for joining us. You've been beyond helpful, beyond fascinating, and I do hope you will be brave enough to come into the men's radio station.
Oh, absolutely, I love it.
Oh, great.
I'd be here every week if you had me.
Well,
it'd be great.
You know what? As my mum used to say, be careful what you wish for.
No, seriously. I would actually be up for doing this every week. I think it's a fantastic.
Thank you very much.
I think it's a fantastic. I've been in this field trying to work with guys, helping guys for over 25 years. This is brilliant. Seeing this stuff happening is absolutely brilliant. Fully support it. Of course, I'm 100% behind it. I'd come back every week. No problem.
That's beyond my wildest dreams. Noel Mecdermontt, thank you so much. We're shaking hands.
Whoa!
You see, we're shaking hands. Thank you so, thank you so much. I'm Russ Kane. You're listening to Men's Radio Station.